Good afternoon and welcome to this episode of the B2B Conversion Podcast. I'm delighted today to be joined by Abi Hough, who is director at U3. They are a digital agency who provide specialist services in usability, conversion rate optimization and software testing. And I know, Abi, you have been in the CRO industry, probably won't want me to say this, but over 16 years, probably more. And you've worked with some great brands during that time, as diverse as those in B2C. I think particularly you had a good stint at Love Film and at Deloitte, and now you are working with a range of clients through your own business in the agency space. So welcome.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me on the podcast. It's very exciting.
Yeah, I mean, you probably love talking all things CRO, being that it's your baby and you've done it for such a long time.
I was there at the outset. I'm that old, honestly.
Well, you can teach everybody, because it feels new to a lot of people, but the fact is it isn't. I think maybe it's new in B2B because we haven't had the opportunity to focus on it in the same way as our B2C colleagues have. And I thought it would be useful this is a question that I ask lots of our guests, because I do worry that B2B marketers see conversion rate optimization, not the UX element, or creating great experiences for customers, being limited on that, but being limited on what they can do from a CRO perspective because of the amount of traffic available on their website and the amount of testing that they can do. I wanted to start by asking you about what your view is on that. Do you think CRO is off limits for low traffic businesses? And I imagine you probably get a lot of them coming to you and saying, Abi, we need to increase this horrendous 0.05% conversion, but we only have this many visitors. How can you help? What's your view on it?
I don't think optimization is out of bounds for any company, really. It's just the method in which you do it. And of course, if you have the traffic, then the go-to is A/B testing, right? It's one of the prerequisites. You have to have enough volume of traffic in order to get a statistically valid result if you are A/B testing. But as you quite rightly say, a lot of companies are not in the position to be able to do that, right? They don't have the traffic. They might not have the budget or the resources that go along with any A/B testing program, as we all bitterly know. There's a cost associated with it. But there are ways that you can optimize whatever particular metric it is that you're looking at without running A/B tests. If I am dealing with low traffic websites, then the primary starting point for that would be to run an audit on that website using my many years of experience to kind of identify the main pain points on that website, whether it's usability issues or it's messaging issues or whatever it might be. So that would be the initial point. And then what I think a lot of companies who can't necessarily A/B test don't realize is, particularly if they're smaller companies, they really excel at doing some of the work that I love specializing in, and that's around discovering who their users actually are, right? Yeah. So they have the time, and because they have a smaller subset, actually it's easier to get a grasp on what that particular segment is all about and what they need. So once an audit is done, I very much tend to then focus on what the users need from that website, whether it's clearer messaging or the product isn't offering what they necessarily need, or that isn't explained in a very good way. But by really kind of digging into that user group, naturally that kind of messaging will eventually come out, and you can start optimizing on that base then. So you fix all the stuff that is just silly stuff that's being done on the website to start off with, and invariably there isn't a massive cost associated with that, because the teams will often have a development group in-house, which you can, they just set them a load of tasks in whatever it is they're managing their backlog with, and work your way through those. I mean, obviously it's not just done off my say so. There would always be some data behind that, and on the provision that they've got a good analytics setup. So that would be another start point, would be making sure that the traffic that they are getting, we're tracking it correctly for a start, because a lot of analytic setups are not great.
Okay, so that's a key part of the process for you as well, making sure all of that's set up to give you the truth.
Yes, exactly that. I mean, as much as I can say I'm an expert in the field, I'm certainly not going to push my opinion alone, just based on what I think, unless there's data behind that to support it. So you can triangulate all these different points. And whilst you might well have a smaller data set to deal with, to look at and compare where these points all kind of come together to highlight a particular issue, it's still possible to do it. And actually the turnaround is a lot quicker because you're dealing with slightly less data. So it's such a minefield. So it's perfectly doable. And just because you don't have a lot of traffic isn't a reason to not start optimizing, because there are ways around it. But of course, you're not going to have that shiny, big, bauble hanging off the Christmas tree of A/B testing. But it's not always necessary. So I wouldn't get people put off by the idea of optimizing just because they don't have that particular tool to use.
Yeah, that makes sense. And when you say the users, most people I talk to say it's really important you have access to customers.
Yep.
Like, that's always a key part of the process. Is like, okay, so you uncover the big no-nos and then you can fix those if they're backed by analytics. But then it's, okay, right, let's ask the customers what we can improve on or what nearly stopped them converting, I guess.
Yes, and that's a very standard part of any sort of optimization program, is to start getting that feedback in, but not just collecting the feedback, but actually analyzing it and seeing what people are saying. And this is another advantage for smaller companies, is that the analysis of this data can be done manually, right? And I am still a big advocate of manually looking through feedback and actually understanding what's being said in the context of a human-to-human relationship. A lot of larger companies now kind of rely on AI and stuff like that. They'll literally write a prompt and say, well, tell me what the top 10 main themes of these 10,000 responses are. And that's, I can see where there's a benefit for doing that when you've got very large data sets, because if you were to do that manually, I'd be here sat till retirement age trying to figure out one survey, but you can't just rely on AI solely. I mean, it's great to give you a starting point, but you really still have to get in the data, and really understand, just try and understand the context in which that particular response was given. So it's not just A or B or 1 or 0 or yes or no. We're dealing with humans, so there's a lot more behind that. If only you can excuse the dog in the background. She's decided she
Oh, I love that.
She's usually very quiet and just sleeps all day, but sorry, back to the point. Yes, it's not strictly A or B, and I still very much believe you have to have a human looking at these results and these responses to understand the further meaning behind them, because there's often a subcontext and AI is not very good at figuring that out yet.
No, agreed. And that's really fascinating to think that actually from a B2B perspective, we could be an advantage, because we are getting, 10,000, 5,000 visits a month, and our customer base is, 300 businesses. We can talk to them and we can capture data much more quickly, as long as we've got that relationship with them.
You can, and also it's easier for you to set up, and say you have 150 clients, right? I think that's fair. And how much time and effort really is it for you to set up user interviews, face-to-face user interviews with these people, where you can have an honest, down-to-heart, truthful conversation with them for half an hour, just to kind of get to the crux of what it is that they need. And it's really sad for me to say that we've kind of gone too far the other way, right? We are removing ourselves from human connections and talking to people, in an honest and unguarded way, like just a natural conversation that you would have with friends or relatives or whatever it would be, back to the sort of sales tactics of the 80s, if you like, where you'd have businessmen flying up and down the motorways and going to visit those potential
Yeah.
clients and actually meeting them in a physical space. Because you can get so much more out of a conversation where you have body language cues to go from, and you can properly observe people's facial expressions, and you can just do so much more in that situation than you can from just sending out a survey and getting a few responses in. So I think B2B is, you have a history of being able to do that stuff really, really well, and I think they should be less inclined to throw that away so easily and actually revisit that as a way of optimizing their products and websites for their customers. So
and I suppose with B2B as well, if you think about segmentation, like the niches, like an ABM and things like that, like most businesses will have like an ICP or particular industries or niches that like, these are really good for us. So actually you can make choices about who you understand more about first based on how valuable they are to you.
Exactly. And
like
exactly. And you are going to focus on those people that you know are going to bring you in that revenue that you truly want, right? But by looking at the other ones that might not necessarily be so obvious, you can then, it might show you some opportunities that you've potentially missed. And we always seem to be chasing that golden goose that we assume is the thing that everybody wants, but there might be I don't know, a duckling somewhere, an ugly duckling somewhere that nobody has spotted and nobody's paying attention to. But actually, it's the very start of a requirement that is needed further down the line. You've just got to be able to see that. So whilst it's great to talk to who you think your target audience are, step outside of that box and go, well, hang on a minute, actually, maybe we should talk to these people as well, because I'm a big believer in having a fresh set of eyes on something, right?
100%.
We can get so blinded when we're working on the same product or the same thing every day. It's very easy to miss the obvious. So sometimes you have to take a step back and go, no, we need a different perspective, different thoughts, different ideas around this in order to stay relevant and appropriate to who we're trying to sell to. So don't discard the ugly ducklings.
No, that makes sense. And one of the things I was going to ask you about, and this goes back to human behavior, is like I could imagine you doing or a team doing those like face-to-face user interviews, and you might have like the website up in front of that particular user and be saying, well, what do you think of this and what do you think of that? And obviously you can see their face. So you can see their reaction, but they might say something different. Now, I know from experience and in my marketing career, as you will well know, that what a buyer says they will do and what they actually do are two really different things. And you've done you're doing some amazing work for clients from a research and buyer insight perspective. In the digital anthropology space to understand how buyers behave online so that you can feed that into the work that you're doing to optimize customer experience and conversion. Can you tell me a bit more about that?
I can. It's really quite cool. And if you're a people person, it's absolutely something you should be looking at. If you enjoy understanding what makes humans tick, then this is probably for you. But it's relevant to so many different things, not just selling to customers, but dealing with your day-to-day relationships, dealing with the people you're working with, all sorts of stuff. So it's really good. But it kind of takes the basic principle of anthropology, which is understanding people and their social values, etc., but within the natural environment that they reside in. So this is not about taking people into a usability lab or into an office space and sitting them in front of a computer and reading off a script, very sort of like formal. And any user in that situation is not going to be behaving in a natural sort of way. You know, I've sat in countless user interviews, and it's just like you can see the people are literally like, I don't want to be here if it wasn't for the 50 quid Amazon voucher. I wouldn't be here at all. You know. So whilst you can get some insights, I don't think they're naturally representative of how a human behaves in the real world. So, you know, and if you have the time and effort to be able to go and study people in the wild, and I have done this for several clients where I've gone out and visited places where their products are being sold and just pretended to be an ordinary person looking at the same thing and just sparking up conversations with them. It's not always practical to be able to do that. It is a luxury and it gets great results, but not everybody's going to be able to do that. But what we have in the online world is this digital anthropology. And it is basically based on the premise that within this marvelous internet age, there are about 10 different types of communities, if you like, that you can, as a researcher, infiltrate and try and have a voyeuristic view on what your users are doing in their reality of their online environment. So, you know, it could be, for example, that you have a fan community for a particular product, where it's basically a group of people who love the stuff you're selling or you're doing, whatever it is, and sitting within those groups and just basically, again, not, you know, announcing, like, oh, well, I'm from so-and-so and I'm working on behalf of la, la, la. It's none of that. You were sat there like ordinary Joe Blogs, just interacting with these people and trying to understand where they're coming from and how they are using your product, and you know the problems that they are having with them, which they're quite happy to complain about to another person on a community fan group. Say, well, this is bloody ridiculous. They are happy to have a whine and a complain on an online group, but they can't be bothered to send you as that feedback, right? So, and it's raw and it can be bitter and it can be quite hurtful to see some of the things that are said, right? You can't be a snowflake when you're doing this. But the results that I've had so far have been not only eye-opening, but massively beneficial for the clients as well. And the beauty of it is that you can not only do it for your client where they've got established communities already, you can then go off to their competitor communities and do exactly the same thing. And you can start highlighting and noting down where your company's doing really well and where the competitor's doing really well, what the pain points are between them. And then you can really kind of do an in-depth competitor analysis to establish what you need to do to be better than them, right? What you need to continue to do to keep your customers. So this is all really based, the point of it all is around retention, right? In the climate that we are in at the moment, keeping your customers, in my view, should be the priority.
And in software, it is number one. Like,
exactly that. You know, for years and years and years, it's all been about acquisition, right? You throw money out to advertising companies, and it all seems to disappear into the ether. And then you think, well, we're having all these visitors, but nobody's doing anything, or you know, we've sent out all these ads and yet nobody's bothered visiting the website. How much money do we spend doing this kind of pointless advertising when it's not well targeted or not well thought out, when in fact we should be using just a small percentage of that marketing budget to try and figure out how we really keep the customers that we've already got, right? What 100%. What can we do so that they never want to leave us? Okay. And a big part of the retention thing is loyalty, right? And another thing that marketers seem to get mixed up is they think behavioral loyalty is the thing that makes retention, right? You know, well, if Abi needs dishwashing tablets once a month, you know, we've got her retention because she always orders for us. But that doesn't lead to loyalty, because let's say I buy it from Tesco's, right? And it's 10 quid for 32 dishwasher tablets. If I see it on Amazon for 8 quid,
Yeah.
I'm just going to flip to Amazon, right? So my behavior does not dictate my loyalty to Tesco's or whoever it is. Actually, my loyalty in that case is dictated by the price point.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
customers are fickle. But what we should be doing is figuring out how we get an emotional loyalty, okay, in order to create retention, because it's much harder to have a breakup based on emotions. I think
Yeah.
anybody who's had relationships will probably relate to that. It's much harder to damage that kind of emotional loyalty than it is for behavioral loyalty. So this money then goes into working on how we create this emotional loyalty for our customers. So therefore it is more hard for them to break up with us. So what do we need to be doing to create those relationships with the customers? And the anthropology, whether it's the real anthropology or the digital anthropology, kind of all feeds back into this loop that we want to have to be able to create those relationships. But the key to it is understanding the users in the first place.
Yeah. So just and obviously we are in the SaaS space, so retention for us is everything. You know, that we as a business have big customer success teams who are just voted to deriving success for customers. But I think what you're saying is, aside from having a great product, which is obviously number one, because that's why they stay, communities are a really good way to hear the things that perhaps a customer wouldn't say directly to you. And then feed that back into you. So you're a real advocate for creating your own community.
If you haven't got one, then absolutely you should, be starting that little environment up. So, just create an online community. If you're a brand, you may not even be aware of a community that already exists, right? It's gone over your radar. You didn't know it was there. So try and find out what it is. And, I don't think it matters what vertical you're in, what industry you're in. You should always have a community. And yes, those communities will have slightly different focuses. So let's say, for example, you're a car insurance company, okay? If you were creating a community around that, you probably wouldn't be filling that with TikToks of stupid random stunts and stuff like that. If it was car insurance, then it's going to be much more focused towards, what happens, how we help if you have an accident, what the processes are, how we can guarantee your price. We won't double your premium just because we feel like it. If you're on an auto renewal, we won't just bump the price up and not tell you. So that community and answering those questions around that community would be very different, for example, for an e-commerce fashion brand, where the community is probably going to be much more about, well, I bought this top, how should I style it? Or I'm this body shape and I've got no idea. I'm a great example. I've got no idea how to dress, so I look half decent. The community would be around that. And, and using that last one as an example, it could probably open up lines for new sort of fashion styles. And, say, for example, you've got a whole bunch of apple-shaped people on there, right? On the website, if that was what the data and the information was telling you, then you'd start creating a line or styling advice or whatever it might be for those people that fitted into that criteria that have got a problem within your community. So it's addressing the community needs, identifying the community needs, and then addressing them either via the website or the product, whatever it might be. So yes, it varies depending on the industry. You've just got to make sure you get the tone of it right for it. And the platform that it's on.
And thinking about, I suppose any community. So two things. Obviously, if it's B2B, we need to, there might be different. If I am like a fintech product, then my community will look very different to if, let's say, I was in manufacturing or sold widgets or something like that. How do you get I guess I guess the businesses running the communities are the ones who have to instigate the conversation to start off with,
Yeah.
because I can imagine there are lots of buyers, customers who just aren't used to using these kind of things. Maybe they're used to using them in the B2C space, but they're not used to using them in the B2B space. So how do you get that kick-started?
Well, the first point of call is communicating with your existing users, right?
Yeah,
And getting them to sign up to the community. And humans are quite simple beasts, really, sometimes when it comes down to it. If you set up a community and you want engagement and stuff like that, and I hate to use Facebook as an example because I think it's the devil's work in most instances.
yeah,
But they do simple things like you get a top contributor tag against your name when you add stuff in, and LinkedIn are doing it now as well, where if you contribute to a particular article, you get a special little tag against your name, like you're an expert in your field, whatever it might be. And that kind of thing works for most people, right? They can't resist a little bit of sort of hierarchy when it comes to how much they're contributing to a particular community. So I think if you've got a user base there, actually getting that initial engagement within that community is relatively easy.
yeah,
And then it's just a case of the communication channels that you have for your existing users, and then going out to your new users. And example again, if you're going back to clothing, every new purchase, what might be, you send out a confirmation, then highlight that community within there. But
yeah.
it's not rocket science to get a community up and running, I don't think, personally. As soon as you get a trickle of people in, and if it then becomes, so for example, software, right? It's really quite easy for software because invariably there's going to be people that have issues with said
Yes.
software, whether it's using it, a bug, whatever it might be. So that community forum, for example, I know Zoom have got forums and things for their users. That kind of thing is perfect for software. You just get a community together, you get people who want to contribute to it, and naturally the content will just self-generate as it builds up. You can't expect you to have a huge number of people and a huge amount of content from the outset. It also requires some input from the business. So you might have people, I don't want to say planted, but possibly planted on there, to generate conversations around
definitely.
all the things that you think people might be interested in, or perhaps a topic or a question that the company wants answering, right? And usually the more controversial, the better.
Yeah. We actually get people having a conversation.
Yes, exactly that. It's like the ultimate clickbait to get them talking, really. It's not difficult. I mean, then if you get a very large group, maybe management of that might be slightly problematic, but then you can even recruit community members to help with that as well. So it's all part of the engagement piece. So it's a win-win for me, I think.
No, I mean, the insight must be so rich. And can you give me or share any CRO success stories where you've had input from communities and been able to implement those on any part of the customer journey, whether that be from the website right through to changes in the product?
Yes. So let's get rid of that. That's annoying. Yes. So there's one client that I had. It was one that I was talking about with regard to visiting a garden centre, actually. They had a number of community groups, and they had very active Facebook community, which were very keen to comment on this client's particular posts and stuff, but there wasn't much two-way communication going on. Anyway, some further digging, I began to see a pattern in the data in that my client seemed to think most of their demographic was older, so boomers, right, which wasn't incorrect. But what they had failed to realise was that there was actually another segment that they were not listening to their voices, and it was younger people who lived in flats and small houses, and they didn't have very big gardens. And these people all assumed that they were excluded from buying this particular plant because they didn't have, ground to plant it in, for example, or the space. But having spoken to the company, they're like, well, yeah, you can grow it in a pot. It can be sat on a patio, balcony, it doesn't really matter. But they had failed to communicate that with the users on the website. So from looking at these comments that we were seeing within this group, it was just like, well, is this worth investigating? And the answer was
yeah.
It absolutely was, And from that, we managed to, we started work on optimizing that particular segment of users, so targeting them more with the advertising, because we knew what we wanted to say to them. It was basically, you don't need a garden.
You can still enjoy all this beautiful green.
It's a wonderful pot, and it's doing remarkably well, and it's not going to die. So that's just one example of where, just by looking at this sort of information that's coming in, and another interesting piece of information that we found was, this older demographic, and the brand kind of assumed that these old people knew what they were doing when it came to gardening. After all, they were retired, right? Nothing better to do. But there was a huge gap between the customer's knowledge about caring for these plants and what the brand assumed they knew. They kind of knew they knew all of it. They didn't need any extra support, but many of them were like, no, we don't really know what we're doing. So it'd be great to have some how-to guides, for example. And, we played around with the content of that, videos about what to do. My plant looked like it's about to die. And it was interesting further because we realized that the format that this older group wanted the content in wasn't short form at all. They wanted long, detailed YouTube videos of what step-by-step guides of what they needed to do. And it was either YouTube or long form articles, right? They weren't interested in, the kind of stuff we see these days where, 2 minutes and you're done. You've got no longer than 2 minutes. No, exactly.
Yeah.
So it was tailoring the content around that segment too. But we wouldn't have been aware of any of this if we'd have not been kind of like listening in to the conversations within these communities. So it works.
That's interesting, isn't it? Because I'm thinking about that from a CRO perspective and thinking, oh God, this is going to sound like a real generalization, but let's say your decision-making unit, they might have different ways that they want to consume content. So let's take a company that sells sales software as an example. Well, their decision makers may be like a sales director or a CEO, but the people who are actually going to use the product, the influencers, they may be like that, I don't know, like a younger generation. They might be wanting to consume like quick snackable videos, whereas I want to get a big ebook that explains to me exactly how this works. And I want to read something. I actually do. I find it.
I still print stuff out if I want to read it. I print it out. Honestly, I can't be doing with reading that on a screen. No,
because you can never. I'm part of it is for my impatience, because I want to find the thing that I want to find, and if I have to watch a whole video to get to it, so there's something in that too, isn't there? And I suppose you might do different stuff at the different stages of the funnel, but really important to think about.
Yeah, and I think you've probably highlighted a nice point there about user research as a whole, in that you can't take it as a quick job to be done, right? It takes time and it takes effort. So to do it properly, you really have to be committed to the cause. It is not a short-term job. And it isn't,
and it's ongoing, isn't it?
It is an ongoing job. Yeah, it's not something that you can look at quarterly and go, did that. Next thing to do, because people's attitudes change so quickly. It's you have to be on top of the ball, and it has to be a continual process. It is a full-time job. Any company that is serious about understanding who their users are, it is a full-time role to be able to keep on top of all of that. So it's difficult work and it takes time, but for me, the benefits are immeasurable, really. Well, they are measurable because you have to measure it, but you know, they are leaps and bounds beyond. And I've seen it, you know, companies that will run out lots and lots of A/B tests and there isn't the thought behind it, or, you know, it all becomes pointless to, you know, because you don't get the results that you need because there isn't that research behind it. And that to me is just a waste of money and resources. So I kind of wish people would, you know, we're all very much running before we can walk in many instances, especially when companies take on optimization as a new thing that they're doing. It's all very fast paced, and then they don't get the results that they want and they get disheartened with it. And then it all kind of like goes on the back burner and it's a completely wasted opportunity. So I just kind of wish that companies would just, you know, do the crawling bit before they're doing the marathon and getting all those good basics and fundamentals in place before they start. And I think that's an important takeaway. It's probably controversial because many other people in the industry would just say, start testing straight away. Working with smaller companies, you can't have
that luxury.
You don't have that luxury. So actually, I think the big players could probably take some lessons away from the smaller players as to, you know, how to do it well and how to really understand who they're dealing with.
And I think there is definitely that view of, okay, so we're doing it right, we need to get technology, but actually if you don't know your buyers and you haven't got insight, then having an A/B testing platform isn't going to help you, and it will potentially convince your organization that there is no mileage in CRO, which is a total untruth. But so it's like, invest the time first, then.
And I think we're probably at a pinnacle point because so many different people offer optimization services now. You know, it is a wash with agencies that will offer you some version of CRO. And I think the quality is probably declining because of that to a degree, because, you know, it's the new next best thing, and it doesn't take much for somebody with a couple of months experience to say, yeah, I know what I'm doing, I'll get you the results that you need, it's all fine. It is also very easy within CRO to massage numbers and figures to show what you want them to show. And I'm not saying everybody does it, but I certainly know it does happen that, you know, things are manipulated in a way that justifies why the program should continue. And there's only so long you can get away with that, and then it all comes crumbling down, and it all, you know, the company, the top stakeholders say, well, I'm not seeing the benefit, you know, so eventually somebody twigs, like, this isn't quite right, is it?
It's not simple. It's not simple.
It's not simple. And, you know, when the stakeholders don't see the bottom line number going up like has been promised, it's very hard to justify the reason for it. And I think that's probably the only way to overcome that, is that CRO is not seen as an individual practice within a company. And this is where we start talking about, you know, culture of optimization. So it's not just siloed to one particular group and invariably one particular metric, which is conversion rate, right? You can't always measure success just from conversion rate.
You said it's not just conversion, it's retention, it's adoption. It's the whole customer journey.
It is absolutely that. And, you know, I think we talked about it before we had our light recording. It is about so much more than that, and it doesn't just start and end on the website, right? There is a whole plethora of things that go on before somebody visits your website to see what it is that you've got to offer. The journey starts well before they open that tab, or, you know, they look at their device, for example. So you have to account for all of that. You know, what do people do when somebody has visited their website and they've perhaps not done the thing that you want them to do, right? And I know that's something you guys specialize in, right? Signaling and trying to, so it's all that piece of work. So solutions like yours come quite handy, I would say. But it's if you don't understand the users, you can't
No.
understand what the signals
No.
are for
No,
you to
then
trigger that next event.
You've got to make well-informed, research-backed decisions to start with. Yeah.
Yes, exactly that. And
Yeah.
a big part of that is understanding who you're dealing with.
Yeah, no, totally.
Yeah.
And you know, you have had you've got a lot of experience, you had a really good career in the CRO space. It'd be really good to know, how has it changed? And I sit on the B2B Council for the DMA, and we talk about how we're attracting youth and up and coming young people into the industry. Is CRO a place that people should want to be? Oh, I
know. Do you know what? I'm probably going to say yes, but with a few caveats. Okay. So I think we probably need to disband the CRO term. I think it's a much bigger picture than that. It really isn't just about conversion rate optimization. There's a whole big LinkedIn discussion that's been rattling on for years about what it should be called. Nobody's really come up with an answer yet, and I haven't got one. But I think the younger generations coming up need to kind of disregard just conversion rate optimization. It is about the optimization of a whole. If they want to remain relevant in this industry, they can't just rely on that. If they are coming into the industry, well, as much as I hate to admit it, you need to get your AI stuff up to par, right? It's the way of the world. And like we said before, if you're dealing with large data sets, you're going to have the help of AI. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
I think everybody probably needs to cut their teeth in an agency environment.
Yeah. I can't argue with that. Yeah.
Yeah. I've done my fair share of agency work, and it can be tough and it can be frustrating, but the learning curve that you'll go through by doing that, it's massive. But the other thing I would say is, once you've got that really solid grounding, and I'm not talking about 6 months worth of grounding, I'm talking 2, 3, 4 years worth of grounding and experience, I would then be looking at specializing in a particular area of optimization, because I think in a world where everybody does everything, you don't stand out. But if you have a niche that you can focus on, and particularly if it's something that you really enjoy. So for me, example, it's the user research and accessibility. I love stuff like that. Anything that helps a human, it's my bag, basically. But by finding that niche, you can then differentiate yourself from everybody else. And if it's a niche that AI is not capable of filling just yet,
well, there's so much
even
that AI is
better.
not capable of. I mean, it's great that it makes stuff go faster, but it's never going to replace human creativity. And
no, from what I've seen, possibly not. Maybe I'm using it wrong. I don't know. I find it useful. I think the best analogy I saw is like having a PA, right? It's like somebody you can just bounce ideas off, or just have a weird chat with. I don't know how to phrase it, but somebody who works from home, who doesn't have a colleague in the back today anyway, that I can just bounce ideas off. It's like, well, ChatGPT will do it. And sometimes it's just enough of a spark for you to go,
it can be a starting point.
Yes.
It can definitely be a starting point. I agree.
Yeah, exactly. But in terms of new people coming into the industry, it's hard, right? And you're going to have to learn a load of different stuff across different things. I didn't think I'd be a numbers person ever, and I'm not a numbers person, but I've had to learn to be a numbers person because that's the name of the game. So and soft skills are also massively important.
Oh my goodness.
I mean, more and more so, actually, I would say, especially with kind of all the changes that are going on in the world these days. Very different world than it was back in the 90s. You've really got to have a decent set of soft skills to get on in this world, so you can't ignore them. You can be as good as you want at any particular area, but if you can't communicate that well with people, then you're not going to really make any progress within your career. And you don't kind of want to be just shoehorned into well, that's the data guy, or
No,
that's the data girl, or, you know, you don't want to get sort of cast type, I suppose that's the word, into a particular role. And you have to be a chameleon, because if you decide that you're going to leave an agency and you're going to go consulting or freelancing or whatever it might be, your clients are going to be able to expect that you will do everything, right? Whether it's
roll your sleeves up and get stuck in.
Exactly. Whether it's, you know, setting up analytics or designing a wireframe or setting up surveys or, you know, building out an A/B test. There are, you know, circumstances I've had where I've had to do the whole shebang, right, from start to end. If you don't have that,
the grounding comes in, because if you you know, if you know how to do it, if there is an like a chance that you have to, you can do it. You're not like, I agree. Get down and dirty and roll your sleeves up and get stuck in. It will help so much in the long run.
And when you're confident with all of those various skill sets that you need, like I said, try and find the thing that will keep you in this industry, because if you just do everything forever, you will lose your mind and lose the plot. You need to find something you love. Well, exactly. It's the same for any career, right? If you fall out of love with it, you're not going to continue. But if you find that one thing that keeps you grounded and you know has a big impact on the work that you do and for the clients that you work for, then roll with it and just be the best that you can and the better than anybody else. That's what I would say.
Brilliant advice. So I'm taking away community. Really think about that insight that you're getting from end to end, you know, so it's not just about the website, it's what happens before the whole journey. Onboarding, retention is obviously key, and it's a great place to be, but you've got to find your niche,
find your thing,
get stuck in.
thank you
so much for